Good afternoon. Today we are having our 10th webinar on why social entrepreneurs or why social entrepreneurship succeeds or fails. Today we are going to cover an important element of startup journey, the funding. Before we move to the funding, please understand that funding is not an end or not an event or not an end of startup. It's one another milestone in the whole journey, and there are a lot of other milestones to cover. To talk about the different aspects of funding, for example, how should social startup organize their activities? What kind of selections do social startups make when they are talking about or when they are choosing their investors? Should it be a choice or should it be the first come first serve basis? Does it matter? Then what kind of money and what kind of valuations do we talk about? How does the founder and the investor arrive at something which is so dynamic, which is so ambiguous, and what kind of thought process and what kind of negotiations take place? What is the inside? What is the inside story of such a funding process? Today we will discuss that. And other elements could be, so what kind of enablers, what kind of facilitators support the fundraising, or how could other players in the startup ecosystem, for example, incubators, existing investors, founders themselves. So what can they collectively do to ensure that the funding flows into social enterprises? So to discuss all of that and to discuss, he is founder and CEO of HESA Technologies Private Limited, a revolutionary organization. A lot of people have tried to decode the dynamics and the working models in rural commerce. People have struggled to find right distribution model. People have struggled to find right kind of consumers and place right kind of products. But all of them have looked in isolation. Either they have put the product without creating the demand, or they have created the demand, but they haven't been able to supply those products. Somehow Vamsi, being passionate about rural commerce, having spent a lot of time in rural marketplaces, has broken that code. Through his innovative social startup, Vamsi has been able to create the demand for the product by uplifting the rural economy and at the same time empower micro entrepreneurs, rural individuals, make those products available or make those demands met. We'll talk more on with Vamsi on his journey so far, on what the kind of impact he has created, what kind of solutions he has provided. But all in all, in such a short time, HESA Technologies has been able to create close to 12,000 livelihoods across Telangana, across Andhra Pradesh states, and he is looking to scale up now big time. Just to add a fact that Vamsi has just raised funding of $2 million, and therefore he is celebrating that, and we are celebrating impact by having Vamsi with us today and share his journey. Over to you, Vamsi.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul, for such a nice introduction. And I really thank this webinar series, to give me an opportunity to talk about my journey, my experiences on the fundraise, startup, pitch deck, and everything. So myself, Vamsi Udayagiri, I'm the founder, CEO of HESA. We at HESA are redefining the way commerce is done at rural. A big background about me. I come from a supply chain, aftermarket supply chain experience, worked for 10 years in various organizations, both as an employee, as a consultant, like Pepsi Foods, Frito-Lay, Gillette, Luxor, etc. After that, I was in a crossroads, whether to start my own organization in the field where I have experience, which is supply chain, or in rural because I'm highly passionate about working in rural. So to figure it out, I went on a journey to the rural. Almost a year, I traveled myself 4,000 plus villages, understood what are all the various challenges that are prevailing there, and then figured out that I think there is something that I can contribute to. So I started my journey into rural in 2012, largely from 2012 till 2019. I've been exploring various options in terms of taking brands to the rural or helping rural economies in terms of farmers or handloom workers, handicrafts to sell their produce through physically creating a last mile network. With that expertise and always this concept of creating a last mile marketplace tech platform is there. So after this geo penetration, mobile penetration into rural in 2018, we realized that this is the time to start our own platform. And with that, we started creating a marketplace model for rural, where we are aggregating everything and anything that a consumer would need in a village into a single platform, and offering this to a village level influencer or an entrepreneur whom we call as Hey Sathi, who is physically present in the village and who also can influence the fellow consumers in terms of the relationship and trust that they have with them. So this is how we have built our last mile commerce model. Because if you typically look at a persona sitting in a village, from their day-to-day challenges of buying products, selling their produce, or meeting their day-to-day needs of groceries, FMCG, financial services, or paying a bill, or as small transaction like withdrawing a money, they have to literally travel to a nearby bank or a town or a village. So this is where we thought that I think rural needs a sector agnostic marketplace model, so that this becomes a last mile connect for the businesses to venture into rural, and this becomes a first mile for the consumers to access their basic services. So I mean, pleasure to be part of this webinar series, and whatever experiences I had in this entire fundraising pitch journey, I'm happy to share here.
Thank you, Vamsi. So, Vamsi, let us begin at the very basic level. So, let's say as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur. So, was your startup, was the launch of startup and all the journey that you took before funding, did you start the journey thinking that ultimately I will receive the funds, or you created or you started the journey to make an impact and then see that okay, once you have created the impact, then the funding support will come? Because there is a lot for hesitation in people's mind that they will not be able to take on the entrepreneurial journey if they don't have access to funding. So what went into your mind, and then when you started, what you thought about this funding thing? Were you confident that okay, funding, no funding, I'll still go ahead and create an impact?
Sure. So it's an interesting part of the question. Coincidentally, what has happened is I started my career as an entrepreneur way back in 2001. I didn't know all these startups, jargons, and all these things. We were trying to create a ERP consulting company in Delhi along with my friend. And after 3-4 years of successfully running that, I wanted to actually get an experience of working in an larger organization. That is where I sold that organization at a good 1.5 to 2 1.6x way back in 2005-6. So somehow this creating a value and all was there, probably not knowing this entire terms or jargons. But coming to when I started this entire journey into rural, in fact, first 1.5 year I was not clear whether I wanted to run as an NGO or I wanted to start as a social enterprise or a full-fledged a commercial model. Because there is a lot of especially when you're working in rural, there is a very thin line difference between a social commerce model, social enterprise, or for-profit enterprise. Because end of the day, we are all trying to work for creating a successful revenue generating models, but there is a huge impact that we are going to create. So with that idea, I always had that with or without funding, I had to start my journey, and we created very successful models last 7-8 years in rural, but we couldn't scale because those are all physically driven models, one. And second thing is, new to this entire rural markets, it took time for us to understand the entire business dynamics there. We failed multiple times, but the only vigor of trying to get back and wanting to create something in the rural was pushing me always. Once I figured out that yes, I think this is the tech platform model that we wanted to build, and I was confident that yes, I think this is one need of the hour. Second thing is it has a scale to the model, and it can really get, if not the commercial fund, at least the impact fund. So with that idea, I just started, and added to that, our numbers increased, our revenues increased, and our network increased, and we got a very good investors who backed us, and yeah, we closed our recent investment.
So what I understand from your response, Vamsi, is that probably what you're trying to say is that you were chasing a bigger impact so that the bigger funds could follow.
Yeah.
It was not the other way around.
Yeah.
You didn't reach out to investors, give me bigger fund and I'll make bigger impact.
Yeah.
I think the philosophy was completely different and completely aligned with the impact. Focus on creating bigger impact, and then the bigger funds will follow.
Yeah.
So
just to add a point on that, see, I always believe that any impact has to happen at a scale. And that too, we are talking about 6.5 lakh villages spread across India. Predominantly 4.2 lakh villages out of that are having less than 10K population, and 2.7 lakh villages with less than 5K population. There are enormous opportunities to create value. And what we thought is, one, directly creating livelihoods to 2 million entrepreneurs. So that's the long-term vision we at HESA are carrying, where if we can create 2 million livelihoods, so directly 2 million into 4, so like 8 million people directly getting benefited. And the socio-economic impact of this, if you look at a decade down the line, they in turn creating another 4 to 5 micro entrepreneurs in villages. So it's going to have a very large multiplier effect in terms of creating values. And again, the market is now very much open. Investors are really looking at models which can be scalable, and thanks to the investors who believed in our model, and they are behind us to actually say that okay, I think let's make it really big, so that we can create large impact, at the same time create value for the people who believed in us.
Okay, good. So Vamsi, as an entrepreneur, so as you mentioned that you start with a particular vision and a particular objective in mind, and then different things will fall into place, and then funding is an essential element. So is there a stage? Is there a particular time period, maybe in terms of number of years, or maybe in terms of the startup stage, or whatever parameter? Is that a particular stage which you feel is a right stage to start seriously making efforts for fundraising? So probably a stage which suits the organization, that suits the investors, that suits the consumers, and then every other stakeholder connected to the startup.
Sure. I mean, anyway, I'm not an expert in this, entire fundraising thing, but I'll just share my experiences. As far as my experience goes, I think answering your first part of the question, which is when you start your journey, sometimes you may not be completely clear of what vision you wanted to create it. It will get evolved, and there is no harm in it. Like, because the way things progress, we have to, there are a lot of things which we need to unlearn rather than, learning it. But once you figure out that, okay, this is the model that I'm focusing on, and when you have your market, product, fitment there, and traction is very important. So I actually, like, we started our, journey in April 2020, and we are now 15 months old. And after 6-7 months itself, we got, we were, getting our numbers increased, and we got break even. So in fact, we approached investors after we were in profits. So our break even, I would say, not profits. But yes, we need money because we need to expand into more geographies. So the only money that we are taking is to expand into many geographies. So it again depends on the individual founders situation, or the enterprise situation. But as far as I'm concerned, or my experience goes, I think if you have a good traction to show to the investors, and if you have a very strong unit economics place, like whether you're whatever is the definition of individuals unit economics, I think that is the time you can actually go and approach to the investors. And again, my experience is, rather than directly approaching, large investors or even angel networks, I think today, a lot of exposure is there. A lot of people wanted to associate and support, startups. There are a lot of, friends community or, mentoring community or advisors or people who believe. So I think initially it's good to actually, take certain amount so that the stakes are not high. When I say stakes, it's the stakes of risk. So, and once you have the traction in place and you know that numbers are increasing, I think that is the time when you really need to approach, investors. But a lot of, I interact with a lot of founders these days. So there is a lot of hard work that goes into it. It's not that, somebody has done it means I'll also get it easily. So believe me, I think it's a process where you have to, it's like, writing your board exams of, 12 or, any entrance exam, because you need to really learn a lot of nuances of fundraising, in terms of understanding more about your businesses, understanding about, the pitch deck, how to rightly position the product, and then the financial valuations and all. Anyway, that financial things people can help, but the core concept of building it or showcasing it as a founder, I think, they have to really, learn it. So I think the stage, if you ask me, is once you have a good traction and your unit economics is right, I think that's the time to hit the market for fundraise.
Okay. Okay. So you say that, what we understand from your response, or, I can just to be sure. So you're saying that, depending on at what stage the startup is, depending on where the startup wants to be, what is the vision of the founder, maybe at times what is the vision or thought process of the associating investor. I think all of these will determine the extent and suitability of funding. But by and large, the process or the acceptability is much higher if the unit economics and profitability is pretty evident. So it means that a lot of grinding and grueling hard work before you are accepted by investing community.
Sure, I think
that's
that's the way you can summarize it.
Yes. Okay, great. So when you said, when you mentioned about the hard work, and then, it was also, we could also read the, that you were recalling the hard work that you have gone through while raising the funds. So would you let us, or would you tell us, what are the 2-3 most important things that a startup should do, and especially the social startup should do when they are preparing for fundraise?
Sure. So again, it may sound a little funny, but I think 80% of the battle is won before you even hit the fundraise. So that means you need to do a lot of homework, and you don't believe me. So I was part of some 3 to 4 cohorts, accelerators, startup programs. Anyone and everyone wanted to hear about HESA. I would, take time. There are days where I used to present about HESA 8 times, 10 times in a day. Before even I presented to investors, I would have presented to some 500 people. So which was giving a lot of feedbacks. So these are all, the kind of practice, sessions which you call in the games. I used to do it probably, those people may not know at the time, but I was actually doing a lot of these sessions because it used to help me. It used to help me prepare better because of various questions people ask. So I think when it comes to the pre-work for the fundraising, which is, rightly identifying the problem statement and what is the solution and positioning it better. And then pitch deck is one part of it, but before the pitch deck comes in, understanding more about business. In fact, I always tell this to my investors also, because thanks to the investors, because the more questions they asked, the more I came to know about my business, because, there were a lot of, questions which, helped me think about, like, okay, I didn't think about this angle to it, like, so that is one thing. And, answering the question. So one is the entire model that you have to get in place before you go and hit it. But then I think pitch deck plays a very major role. A lot of people, don't underestimate the value of, the pitch deck, the value of it, because see, you're not physically meeting someone and then just because today nobody has patience to read beyond a document more than 20-30 seconds. So you need to really impress them in those 20-30 seconds. So you're it should start. That's why they call it as an elevator pitch. Like, normally in Newark and all, like someone travels 20 floors before the elevator stops, you should tell about the model. So,
Yeah.
and it should start with a bang.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why, all these filmmakers also, when they release the trailer or the teaser, so it's like very hooking it. So you tend to listen, like, what is the next coming to it. So I think pitch deck is very important, because then comes an opportunity for you to go and talk to them for, at least a half an hour or 45 minutes. So I think creating a good business model, financial model, and a pitch deck, and FAQs about basic questions of, what investors ask in terms of, what is your model? How do you monetize your? There are certain basic things that we should know. Then you can get better over the process. But I think once you're ready with all these things, I think you should go and really talk to the investors. And today investors are also really looking forward for a lot of models, because see, today fortunately there is a lot of interest on the startups, especially on the social startups, because this is the only place where you get an impact also, and also
Financial returns.
creating a large value, financial value to it. So yeah.
Okay, so lot of startups have the question. They also struggle with that. Where do we find investors? So you talked about preparation. We have talked about readiness of the startups to raise funding. So that is assuming that they have funders available. So how do you, what kind of initiatives, or what kind of networks, or what kind of activities you did to reach out to investors?
Yeah.
Or because of certain, being part of certain ecosystem, uh, did that process get a little easier or smoother for you?
Yeah. So as a founder, we shouldn't shy away from actually meeting larger audience. So I think the best way to go about is, there are a lot of startup competitions happen. So where there are a lot of people from either the principals or the partners from the funds come and judge the competition. So that's a very good platform for you to showcase and get the feelers of it. Then there are very good acceleration or the incubation. I mean, acceleration comes later, but incubation programs are there where not only they teach you about the nuances of the basics of fundraising, but they will also connect you to those industry experts or investors, which itself is another way to find out the investors. But I think, see, end of the day, it's our battle, and we have to fight and win it. So I think we shouldn't leave any stone unturned. So we should directly reach out to investors sometimes, or we should find out certain. I wouldn't call them as investment bankers, but there are a lot of people who facilitate introducing to startups, and that's one way of looking at it. And being part of a lot of initiatives, especially when we are talking about Telangana, Hyderabad, there are a lot of incubation programs over here, a lot of support for social startups, and a lot of boot camps happen. I think that is the way to find an investors also.
Yeah, so I think so. Basically, what I understand is that there are ample opportunities, there are ample platforms. The point is not to shy away from participating and exhibiting your startup on those platforms.
Yeah.
And then you are bound to get picked.
Yes.
Good, great.
If not, picking up, at least we will know, like, where we have failed.
Yeah.
That is one thing. And second thing is, it will expose to a lot of connections. And sometimes we don't know. I think I was part of one session where actually a junior analyst from an investment firm participated. She somehow liked it, picked up, then she introduced to the investors, and the entire funding happened. So sometimes we don't know from where the real fund comes in.
Yeah. So I think, for our social entrepreneurs who are participating in this session, I think this is very, very important piece of insight that Vamsi is giving. A lot of people come to us, being BBIC, being a leading and leading social incubator, the innovative social incubator. We get a lot of direct queries from our prospective startups as to where do we find investors. But I would say that finding the investors is not as easy. There's no directory that is available, and even if directory is available, people are not going to respond to these approaches. So they should know you, they should have a little exposure to you. So please utilize all the boot camps, all the startup initiatives, all the competitions, use good quality pitch decks, and then go and give it all. And even then, Vamsi, how would you say the success rate would be? So how many investors you sent out the pitch deck and how many responded? Again, this will depend on, again, so many factors at to what stage you are in, how what is the quality of pitch deck, and how people are perceived, and whether they have been exposed to you earlier on any platform, whether they have seen you. But let's say in general, if that is something that you have experienced.
Sure, definitely. I think for us, we had a very good problem, which is initially only we got attention of very large investors. So that's a problem because we are still stitching a lot of things. I'm talking about October 2020, when even major, larger VCs that approached and we presented. But I think, in fact, now if I have to look at myself in October 2020, I think I've grown phenomenally as a person or as a founder in terms of getting the knowledge of fundraise. But ideally, I think people say around 80 to 100, but I think my experience is like I would have approached to 50, 60 investors before which our fundraise situation happened.
Okay.
But once you are in the vicinity of the investors and they really like the model, it's like reverse way now, like, people, at least now I hear from a lot of investors, and it's a good problem now to have, and wherein investors really like to back successful models.
Yeah.
In terms of the value that we are creating, and the way we have grown in especially last 4 or 5 months, because when we raised our funds around May, June, we were present in 5,000-6,000 villages. We've already doubled it, and the way we are growing it in terms of all our numbers of locations, or the Hesatis, or the revenue numbers. The last 12 months revenue, what we did, we crossed in first 3.5 months, and now we're looking at almost crossing that in a month's time or 1.5 months time. So so investors really like to back successful models. But yeah, I think initially, I mean, like as a founder, a lot of people, like I've presented to 3-4 people, they didn't like it, they become kind of sad, or probably investors are not understanding my model. I have a very strong model. So you may think you have a strong model, but investors have their own reasons to whether they like it or don't like it. Probably the story is not coming fine, or the economics is not able to come fine. So I think my suggestion is to not get dejected in terms of the feedbacks that you hear from investors, and keep pushing yourself in terms of reaching out to many investors. And I'm sure, I think if you reach out to good 40-50 investors, I think you should, if you have a very strong model, and if you are well prepared, and if you have, as I said, traction and unit economics, I'm sure you should be able to take the fund.
I think that's a very, it completely fits the old saying that nothing succeeds like success.
Yeah.
And then persistence and perseverance, I think they are the only way to
Yeah.
go. So I think, your interaction with investors, and then the fact that, the situation that you are in, you are having a very different problem. So you have investor interest being shown, and then a lot of people want to associate with you. So coming to my next question, as a startup and as a social startup, now that you have a choice to pick a particular investor or a group of investors, so what do you how do you choose those investors? This is one part of the question. And now that you have a choice, you can choose the investor. But should any startup which is desperately looking for funds, should they also exercise that kind of choice, even if they don't have?
Yeah.
So do you have that, kind of a parameter to pick and choose the investors?
Yeah. Yes, sometimes, yes, definitely. I come from a little old school in terms of that, initially I'm a person who, can't say no, that kind of a thing. But yeah, learned a lot during this process. But yes, I think the first things that we need to look for is the investors who really can create impact in terms of not only the money, because money is today available, but more the kind of connections they can introduce you, or how they can support you in this entire journey. So that is one thing which is of primary importance, to select investors based on whether they fit your segment, because there are some startups who have inclination towards clean energy or agriculture, or when we are talking about a social enterprise in terms of employment generation, livelihood generation. So better to choose someone who is having interest towards the segment we are working in. But I think as initially, we may not be every time having that position to choose. My advice to it may sound little crazy, but my advice to founders is, if money is available in the market, at least for your first fundraise or even for the follow-up fundraise, I think go and pick it up. Because I think whatever you wanted to create, if funding is the only way you wanted to actually expand it, and if the fund is available, don't think that this investor, that investor. Get the fund coming in, show traction, show numbers, then the right investor will come to you. They will chase you to come and invest. So I think whatever is available, I think you should go and pick it up.
Okay, so I think
That's my
yeah.
I may be right, wrong, but my experiences.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, because to be honest, in the initial, during the initial phase, the question is about survivability. It's not about any other choice. If you can't survive, you can't have any
Yeah.
other choice left in future.
Yeah.
So I think that's the survival instinct. So you survive and then you thrive.
Yeah.
And then you get into a position where you can then afford
Yeah.
to make those choices. But now the second part. So now that you have a choice, what will you look in an investor?
Couple of things. One is any investor who really backs you with a kind of a right positive vibe. I mean, thanks to our existing investors, it is in official news, so I can share it. So we have venture capitalists who initially believed in our model, and then followed by, we have IP Ventures, FAD, Kiretsu, V Founder Circle, and few private investors. So the kind of positive vibe they give, one is, as our model is a collaborative model, our networks also helped us to get more connections in terms, so that our expansion became easy and all. But what I've realized is, I think our investors are also very passionate in terms of creating value. So the kind of rapport that I share with them, or rather they share with us, is really, initially as a founder, I used to think that whether I can talk to an investor like this and all, but they really made me comfortable. I think one strong thing is, any investor who personally believes you in your model, and who doesn't come into because you are the founder, the business, how to scale it. All you need is probably some external advisors. But I think it may be a wrong thing if you take an investor, an institutional investor, who gets into your day-to-day business and trying to influence. I think that should be a hard stop. But I think choosing the right investor who understands your sector, who helps in larger connections, who also helps in further fundraise situations, and who backs you, saying that, I think I'm there to support you. And the only way to do that is saying that whenever you are raising your next round, I'm ready to put 20%, 30% of the round and all. So I think these are all this factors, at least I would see it, and yeah, and some good names to associate with, because the kind of model that we are building in, which is a rural tech platform, both for buy and sell happening, I think for us, not only India, there are like at least 40-50 countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. There are a lot of countries where we can expand with the kind of model that we have created, and it requires a huge expansion for next 4 or 5 years. So we are really looking forward to create a, the largest rural tech platform. So good names to associate with so that we can grow internationally is also one thing which we are looking for.
Okay, good. I think I think what I'm what I'm understanding from your assessment of investors is that, just like it is very important to have a very good co-founder and equally strong and passionate team, I think investors are also the extended part of the organization. It is
True,
very
true.
important to have them as well, getting aligned with the organizational mission, values, and objectives, and be there with you. They
True.
believe in you. So it's very important to treat them as, the part and parcel, not as only the source or resource provider, but as an integrated part of the organization. That will help.
True. In fact, as you rightly said, investor is kind of an extended co-founder.
Yeah.
Because a right investor again. So, and a lot of investors, other than the connections, they really work towards correcting you if you are probably going in a wrong direction, or sharing their experiences because they would have been a founder earlier, or they know larger organizations. So I think definitely having the right investor adds a lot of value other than the money part of it. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, Vamsi, now that you have interacted with the investors and you have created pitch decks, you have participated. So, pitch deck and competitions. So, they are one way to get exposed. But when it comes down to writing a big check, are there factors other than the idea, other than the financial or unit economics, that the investors look or evaluate? So let's say the personality attributes, or the let's say the integrity of the founder and the team, the way he or she is managing. So are there any other factors that you have noticed are also influencing the investment decision making?
Yeah.
There are so many businesses that can be profitable,
yeah,
but not everyone gets. So are there some other factors, and have you observed that?
Yeah. So what I have observed, especially what are the primary 3-4 things that an investor looks is definitely one is the idea, but I think more than the idea, the founder, because the right idea sometimes with a wrong founder, would not enable to grow it. But what has happened is a normal idea also sometimes, to a great founder. I mean, great definition is someone who has a perseverance and who achieved it. So would become very large. So I think a combination of a startup plus a founder is very important. And I personally, notice that they give a lot of importance to the founders per se, because whether this founder has the capability, understanding of his own markets, or has the capability to get right resources. One is the money, one is the team, but the entire ecosystem in place, and who can drive this to a stage where if I'm an investor, at least I get 10x, 20x, whatever it is. So I think these are all the traits that they look for. One is definitely the founder. The scalability of the model is another important point, because see, there are certain models. I mean, as a business, they are very good, but there are certain models which can't scale beyond a point. For example, if I'm into a specific solution, after the market size is over, I can't expand.
Scale it up. Yeah.
So they look for the scalability of the model and the competition that is existing in the market. So especially when we are working in markets like India, I think any good idea, if you come get in, I think India has space for at least 4 or 5 startups to become a unicorn in the same segment because of the mere population that we have. But again, so whether we can still withstand that competition and be a player, at least to give a competition, so that in future somebody can do an acquisition or merger, or probably what we know. I mean, we don't know whether we can beat the existing models also. So I think scalability, the competition, the founder himself or herself, and the right team is very important. See, because initially it's all about the founder, because after a certain point, founder has a limitation because he has a vision, he can take it to a certain level, but It's all important about the right team in place who not only understands and shares your vision, they have to take that vision to the ground level.
Yeah.
And if your customer becomes your stakeholder, I think that's the stage at which you're really built an organization which is huge. So because your team is the one who is actually taking the company's vision to the end consumer. So I think combination of these 4 or 5 factors is what I've noticed that the investors really look for.
Okay, I think pretty interesting point. Fundraising or funding itself is not a guarantee for success.
Yeah.
Utilizing that fund and then making sure that the next round is also coming is something that is pretty exciting, and that's what we are going to talk to you about now. So you have raised $2 million recently, and now you are looking or already in the process of raising maybe 10, 20, 30, I don't know what times that funding now, and you are very well into the process. So that experience, maybe next time we'll talk about. But I want to, understand your thoughts and for the benefit of our participants and the social entrepreneurs who are, intently listening to this
Sure.
session. So $2 million is a pretty decent amount. And for $2 million, you would have parted some portion of your company, which you built. That was like your baby.
Yeah.
That was your, life for so many days. So giving that part away, I will not go into the details of how much you gave away, but I just want to understand that, given that the conventional or established valuation methodologies are not completely applicable in this kind of situation. So how do you decide between you and investor that how much portion of your company will go or sell for $2 million?
Okay.
Or for that matter, whatever amount?
Yeah.
So what is the kind of, because no fixed formula, no this thing, it becomes a game of nerves probably, I don't know. So I just want to learn through your experience that how do you manage this?
Sure. So it's an interesting question. So first thing is, I think whatever you said about our fundraise. So yes, I think thanks for that. And coming to the specific points that you have asked for. See, the thing is, especially in the initial stages, so there is no fixed formula. Though, over a conversation, a lot of people, investors ask, they only ask because whether you know or the concept or not. Like, that's why they ask, what is the valuation method? Is it DCF, RAM? If you ask the same question 6 months back, it's a Greek and Latin to me also. But I think, at least you should know the understanding of it. But I think when you are at a concept stage and you are raising a seed fund, I think there is no straight formula. The only thing is, at least for us, what has worked in our favor is before we raised funds itself, we had a very strong revenue model at almost a break-even model. So there was some multiplication that we did. We went to the investor saying that I think this is what we feel, and next 5 years we are going to do that. So why can't we do an averaging and all this thing? So investors respect that, but they also wanted to enter where they can contribute certain value. So some negotiations happened, and I mean, it's not too much of negotiations at our end. Somehow, as I said, they're like, I mean, we are lucky enough at least, but most of the times it doesn't happen that way. Wherein you say some valuation and investor says, "Chalo, I think we will invest." So it's a hard negotiation that happens, and because they understand what we are trying to do. They may not understand on a day-to-day basis, but they understand at least. See, the basic thing that an investor is, at least if my principal is saved or not, or if I do a next level fundraise, probably they can get a good exit if they are looking for. But in our case, it's a reverse. So in fact, they believe that we can do a very large exit in next 3-4 years. So everybody wanted to be part of the journey. But I would like to cover a few perspectives from the founder, perspective, because a lot of people I interact I was definitely not like that because again, maybe the hard learnings that I did it, in my life has taught me. So there is no point of keeping, 100% myself where I know that, I can't expand beyond certain limitations that I have as a person. So rather, I think, build something very larger where you have a considerable, percentage of the value that you are creating. So, uh, my point is, I think, don't even think that okay, I'm diluting this much percentage and all. See, because if you really are able to create a value, I think definitely after your series B or C, or after larger rounds, then the real value of your organization is created, because this is all a percepted value. See, you're saying that okay, I've done a business, we are not even in profits, we are not even in one state, two states, then we are saying that we will create a unicorn, we'll create a billion-dollar model. So that is all good, that shows the founder's confidence. But I think initially, we shouldn't even look at those kind of a things that and I wanted to keep it more for myself. So I think that is primary thing. And second thing is, again, a lot of people chase for I wanted to be a unicorn in next 3 years, I want to be 4 years. I would have also told that statement sometimes, but I think what is more important is what is today's situation. Like, if I don't even take my organization from point A to point B, unicorn is a very far off moment. So both in terms of the numbers, the traction, and second thing is most importantly, uh, uh, getting that value for your organization. So first, let's get validated by someone saying that okay, at least your organization is of this value at whatever XYZ work you have done it, and probably from there is a benchmark created, and then you know where to go and expand it. I think that's what I personally feel, that I think founders shouldn't even bother about how much to be diluted, at least in initial stages. And second thing is, it's all about creating the value. So the fancy things will come, definitely follow later.
So I think so. So I think Vamsi, you have touched upon a pretty the point that we discussed earlier, with which we begin. So chase the impact. So what you mentioned here, and the underlying philosophy is that forget about how much value you are getting out of it. Just focus on creating the impact bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So I think that ties down to your philosophy, and then your vision of creating an impact, and then build everything around it with that focus in mind.
I think very well summarized. I think the moment you start showing value, not only to your investors, see, investors fundraising is one part of it, but what I wanted to convey is creating that real value to the customer, the end consumer for which your product or a service is built. I think once you do that, I think your customers only become your torch bearers for taking this entire journey ahead.
So Vamsi, before we take audience the questions from the audience, so there are some questions that have come to me. You mentioned the importance of pitch deck. So I want you to share with the audience what are the key considerations, or what should be the key points while preparing the pitch deck. So what should the entrepreneurs keep in mind? What should be the focus? Is there any is there any particular size or number of slides or particular way? So whatever you feel. I know that you have very interesting terminologies where you associate the pitch deck and then overall this thing with the tech companies for easy to remember. So, Amazon and Facebook, this like that. We may not have time for that in the platform, but if you have to tell a few important inclusions in the pitch deck, what will they be?
Sure. I think the first point here is again the market sometimes goes with very standardized templates or standardized techniques, and I'm not getting the right word, but saying that okay, your pitch deck should start with this, it should have 7 slides, 10 slides, and I mean, I'm in dead, no to this, because I mean, this is your story, you know it better. And if you can convey that in a better way, I think you should do it. But yes, there are restrictions that, the other person can't read it for more than certain time. So you should make it so crisp that, by seeing it may have 15 slides, but, it should just, convey the message, if somebody is glancing also. And second thing is, there is no straight and fixed formula that, it should start with the team, or it should start with the problem statement, or it should start with the market size. But I think it's always my experience. Again, I know I believe that it should start with the problem statement in terms of identifying the persona of your consumer. If your consumer is this and this is what their day-to-day challenges are, and if you can build a story around it, because when you have built any business model, you would have kept your consumer in mind, and you would have built it that, okay, so bring your story from the consumer perspective. I think that's what my personal observation, I mean, like, experience is. And second thing is, a lot of founders, so sorry to use this, but they clutter the presentation. So because pitch deck is what? It's our thoughts kept into a deck or a slide. So whatever comes in their mind, they try to keep it. But I think you shouldn't clutter it. I think you should have a free flow, have very lean, way of explaining things, so that people understand it. And yeah, if you can afford to, in terms of having right resources, it's not necessarily that you need to spend money on that, but to get good graphics, good pictures, good images. There are a lot of free images that are available now. So I think I would have, in last 1.5 years, I changed my pitch deck 4 times. So, and every time I see my old pitch deck, it's like, oh, how could I have shared this kind of a pitch deck about my model? So it's all about continuous learning, being better ourselves, and somebody gives a feedback. If you feel that the feedback is important, try to incorporate. So I think a lot of founders do a mistake right at the pitch deck itself, by following a certain format, or this may be revolutionary, I don't know, but sometimes it's not the standard format. You should, like, if there are 10 people pitching in, and you have to be different in those 10. So start with something different, so that you stand in between those 10. It seems okay. Now I would put it in this way: the end expectation of a pitch deck is not fundraising, is to get a time from an investor to speak in detail with you. Yeah, that's what a lot of people miss it. So I think if you can do the justice of showing your pitch deck, if not physically presenting, by sending to someone, and if you are able to get a next time where you are spending half an hour, I think that should be the end result to look for in a pitch deck. And these 4 or 5 things, as I mentioned, like, don't clutter, no fixed formula, your story better. And yeah, I think these are all the most important points.
Yeah, I think very important idea, because often people struggle to find those fixed formats. They're looking for those fixed slides, and then each story is different. How can you slot? It's not a cookie cutter, you can't fit everything. Yes, we understand, as you rightly said, that yes, there are competitions, they'll give you fixed formats, but those formats are still open for little creativity. Yeah, you can still open them up.
Yeah, whatever limitation you have, I think, we can show our creativity.
Yeah, so you can still maneuver, you can still customize, and you can still be within those what do you call, the guidelines and the frame works and the references. But I always say that if you are so keen to follow all the guidelines, don't be an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, the basic premise is that you are going to challenge all that is fixed.
Yeah. You're going to break all the.
Yeah, so you're going to break all of that. So be it. So be the pitches, and so be the pitch formats. Yeah. Good, great.
I would add a point here. I'm sure I can share it to my audience. So Rahul here is actually one of my mentors earlier when I was part of a boot camp, and he gave me one feedback. So while I was presenting it, like in terms of the unit economics or the numbers, make it very clear, so that it is evident in your pitch deck, which I have taken it. And probably there are a lot of feedback. Sometimes we may not incorporate. It's not that, every feedback we can incorporate, but I think that is one feedback which I, taken and, incorporated. And so in fact, those are some hooking points in a presentation, which, investors look for, the impact point when, especially when we are talking about a social enterprises. So like, okay, this much impact we have created. So I think that's a good,
Good. Very good. So we have some questions from our audience now. So, first question is, so what kind of expectations do impact investors have? So we know that they have expectations around profitability, of course, because they are there for returns. But are there any other expectations that they put? So are there any return expectations? Are there any impact expectations that they put? Now you have to do so many, this should be the minimum impact, or this should be the target impact in addition to the financial return.
Sure.
So what are the,
So when it comes to impact investment, I think, the first thing that an investor looks for is the sustainability of the impact that you have, created. One is definitely the livelihoods or whatever, sometimes it is the livelihood, sometimes it is the value created, sometimes the percentage of carbon that we have reduced, depending on the startup. But the first thing is the impact numbers in terms of what is the impact, actual impact. Second thing is, how sustainable is this impact? Like, okay, you would have gone into a village, and I'm sharing my experiences, or created a micro entrepreneur in a village who is solving some 10 problems. But is this sustainable? So that's very important, because a lot of times what happens is the idea may be very good, the concept may be very good, but when it comes to the impact, the impact has to be always sustainable, scale, and really at a scale. So I think these are the two primary things which probably I mean, I don't know the other side of the thing, but whatever I understood, I think these are the primary factors they look for.
Okay, so second question is, throw some light on CSR ecosystem where corporates are spending on social projects. So I think this is the question from one of our participants, Harish. So Harish, I think this session is more focused on fundraising, and then fundraising in entrepreneurial venture. The CSR funding is more like a philanthropic spend. We also conduct sessions on CSR spending. I think please look out for those sessions which talk in more detail about CSR spending and CSR fundraising, and then how organizations or NGOs can reach out to CSRs and do the fundraise. As per law, the current legal situation, the CSRs cannot directly invest in any social startup. There's no scope for investing. Next question. So please elaborate on the impact investing ecosystem, and what kind of expectations do they have in form of returns, etc. What are the usual terms and conditions? So I think to some extent you have already answered the question. So the impact, as Vamsi shared, the impact investors, in addition to the returns, they're also looking to see the sustainability of impact. So they also want to see that the business model or the revenue model that you have created, which is creating the impact, is not dependent on external fundraise. There's an inbuilt mechanism which will keep this impact going, and that's what they meant by sustainability. So I think that's the philosophy of impact investors, that they're looking for both impact as well as returns. In the form of returns, I don't know if Vamsi, you have encountered any impact investor asking for a fixed percentage of returns. Even if they have it internally, they will probably not share it widely.
Yeah, so this is not part of a, I mean, definitely, by the way, I didn't have any of these experiences. But when it comes to the fundraising that you have done from an impact investor, I think it is as good as any venture capitalist or someone like that, where one such factor for them is to look at the impact part of it. So because there are certain startups who back the startups led by women, or solving the climate challenge, or probably COVID situation. So, but I think end of the day, it's all about how monetization can be done and how scaling has to happen. So I don't think impact investors will look for a fixed kind of thing. Then it becomes a grant exercise where they are giving a grant and saying that, okay, you need to create this much impact.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. So, the second part is that the usual terms and conditions. So, I think these are any other financial terms and conditions that would accompany. So, impact investors. Do they put any additional impact related things in the term sheet, or it's the usual financial term sheet?
Yeah. So the term sheet will be largely, the standard financial or the legal terms. But yes, I think the understand may be there in terms of, certain impact numbers need to be generated, or again, it depends on, conversations between founders and investors. Sometimes you may have to negotiate with investors that, okay, if I achieve this much impact, I would like to claw back certain, shares, or it's all depend on individual situations, but largely the legal terms.
Okay, another interesting question, which I always say that. Okay, so is there something called part-time entrepreneurship? Can you do can you work part-time and then you do entrepreneurship in your spare time, and then once you raise the fund or once you have some clarity, then jump full-time? Is it a model that is
No, I think as far as I'm concerned, I think you can only learn to swim when you jump into water. So it's nothing like, it's all theoretical, and there is no commitment from your side. Okay, I mean, if this comes in, I will try to take a step. One, like for example, yes, if there are 2-3 co-founders who thought that, okay, this is a model, probably financial support from being external. Anyway, for us, that situation also didn't came in. So we both jumped into the water and then learned our own way of doing it. But I think if you are a solo founder or 2 founders with a different skill set, I would suggest, do it a full time, because that not only enables you to, learn a lot of things. Because see, if a lot of people, today talk about success, but I think the real learnings are there only when the failure comes in. And initially, those are the times when you can learn a lot of nuances about the businesses. So until unless you do it full time, you can't learn. Second thing is, investors don't invest on startups who are trying to do a part-time, driving the business. So
yeah, I think it is very logical. If you don't have confidence in yourself,
yeah,
how will someone else
Yeah.
has that kind of confidence?
Yes,
So
yeah.
I think that's very natural to answer the question put up by a gentleman here, that it's important to have this confidence before you ask someone else to back you up.
Yeah.
So we have another question, Vamsi. So they're asking, is the same idea packaged into different kind of pitch deck? So basically, what I understand is that you do need to do some alteration or some customization on your pitch decks, depending on where and how, on what platform you are presenting. So what kind of alterations or what kind of components undergo that alteration? What should be fixed? What should be flexible?
Yeah.
Is there a formula to it? Or again, it's the same? I mean, if I have to answer that question, I would say, guys, it's your story.
Yeah.
You are the best person to tell it. You see whether
yeah.
you are telling it to the kids or to the adults.
Yeah.
You decide.
But it's an interesting question, because I think a lot of times founders, myself also face this situation where every other pitch that you're doing it probably to an investor or an influencer or a potential business tie-up or whatever, the changes, or sometimes based on the investor, you may need to, alter certain things. So, or based on your fundraise situation also, like, though the concept may do it, like when you are raising a seed fund versus a pre-series where you want to talk about numbers, because initially it's all about the storytelling, but after some time you have to back with numbers. So I think it's a genuine concern which a lot of founders will have. But I think the formula is, I think 70% should be a format which is common, and remaining 30%, depending on the situation, where we are in terms of business or whom we are speaking to, has to be altered, or based on whether you are, let's say, there are certain formats which the investors look for, certain, not the serious, I mean, like VCs, but initial networks, angels and all, they have a certain format too, which, because they give time to 15-20 to present in a 1 hour's time, so where they can't afford to give more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes time. So in that times, you don't have much flexibility where you have to present it. But I think I would suggest you should have many version controls where you should customize it, because it's like how you, when you go and sell a product to a customer, you have to sell as if you've made the product to that customer itself.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think the pitch deck also has to be customized, and it shows that, okay, I think as a founder, he has done certain homework before coming to me, is what an investor will think of. So I think better to do some customizations, if not the entire thing. The basic structure skeleton remains the same, and do certain changes based on the situation you are in.
Good. So I think with that, we have finished the questions, Vamsi. Good luck to you. Thank you so much. Good luck to your next funding. Any last word, any observation, any piece of advice that you want to give our social entrepreneurs watching this session?
Sure.
Any piece of advice you want to give them?
Sure. By the way, I've read somewhere this question. HESA is not an NGO. We are a for-profit social enterprise to create value, and not only for us, but for our investors and stakeholders. So I think, I mean, my piece of advice, I'm still not, I personally feel that I have not reached to a certain stage to give advices, but I think my only suggestion, being a fellow founder, is to focus completely on your business, the impact that you are going to create, building a very strong unit economics model, and investment will definitely follow. And I think don't even bother about getting into the investment. But yes, I think before you reach to a certain stage where you need real investment, I think there are a lot of friends, families, or business connections or mentors who are ready to support it, and take whatever fund available. Build a strong unit economics model, and then go to an investor. That becomes a very strong story to tell and sell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think all of us here wish you good luck, Vamsi, not only with the fundraising, but I think I personally I'm personally more impressed by your vision of creating the impact. Right from the first meeting that we had for that mentoring session, the thing that impressed me was that you were very clear on what you want to do. And we did discuss something on the expansion and fundraising and on expanding geographies. I remember, we talked about how to expand. And then at that time also, I had some views. I think you also respected those views. So thank you for that as well. But keep doing the good work. We wish you luck for that. Keep creating the impact. Keep remembering us. Keep coming to us. Thank you so much. And for our participants, I hope that you enjoyed the session today. We are planning a lot more knowledge sessions. Please stay tuned. We will reach out to you on different platforms. Please come to us. Please be part of the sessions, and do reach out to us for any further help or support. Good day to you. See you all next time. Thank you all.